when we feel insecure about something, other people are going to be able to trigger us so much easier. And this entire universe is landmines, and social media has only improved that tremendously. So everybody feels so much more free since the advent of social media to judge and to give their opinions to each other. And so in some ways, we have to build a different type of armor when we navigate through life, because we have to understand that, like, if I'm good with me, then I can be good with whatever your opinion is about me. Whether I agree with it or not, I can respect that. But when I'm not good with me, I'm going to take it personally, and then I'm going to be in my emotions, and then I'm going to react. I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to feel betrayed. And so that always starts with building that sense of security.
I'm your host, Kim Hines, and welcome to the Emotional Eats podcast. I'm on a mission to show you that what you consume, not just the food, affects your entire life. Midlife is different. Let's dig into the real reasons why you eat when you're not hungry and why you're not feeling well. My guests and I are going to give you doable solutions and help you let go of perfectionism, food rules, and stress to make changes that will last a lifetime. If you're ready to ditch old school diet culture and nourish your entire life, this is the show for you. Welcome to episode 17 of the Emotional Eats podcast. If you're a woman who's been going through some tough life transitions or going through one now, this episode is for you. In this week's episode, I'm joined by the amazing Cam McGean. She's a mother of two and a full-time mindset coach, and also the co-founder of the EFT tapping method for coaches. Cam's personal journey from adversity to resilience shapes her coaching philosophy. She's here to share her insights with you. We all face tough times in life, and Cam dives into embracing that change, redefining our identities, and building resilience. She discusses how understanding self-worth, value, and abundance really transformed her life and career, and teaches others to do that also. We explore identity shifts, especially for women, and how important boundaries are to help us connect with authenticity and nurture our own well-being. The highlight is when Cam explains tapping, or EFT. This tool calms the nervous system, releases stuck energy, and reprograms the mind-body connection, leading to personal and career transformations. You can also check out episode 6 with Jason Winters, her co-founder of the EFT tapping method. But Cam uses tapping in her coaching, and it's transformational. Stay tuned as Cam provides at the end 3 major takeaways for navigating transitions. This episode will uplift and inspire you to move forward positively. Make sure you check the show notes to connect with Kemma, to connect with me, and also get your 20% off discount code for Organifi Superfood Supplements. Enjoy the episode. Hey, Kemma, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. I'm so honored to be on your podcast. This is exciting.
It's going to be fun. I'm really excited too, because the topic today, we're going to be really looking at how big life events can really change us in ways that help us redefine, whether we want to or not, redefine those identities. But I want to step back and I want to talk about you first. I'd love to know, as such a heart-centered coach, there's a reason why you've gone into this business. And I'd love to know a little bit about your background, why you love helping people this way, but also how did it make you the way you are? Because the way you help people is not just straight up coaching. It's very heartfelt. There's a lot of energy involved, and you really take to heart how you work with people. So where did that come from?
Yeah, great question. So I always joke that my passion for coaching and for working with people the way I do, it's where it comes from kind of sounds like an old country song, because 10 years ago, I left a really unsafe relationship with a toddler, a new baby, $300 in my pocket, and my dog. So I, it's a kind of a sad tale to think about, but when I'm really honest with myself, it was the scariest time of my life. I was in a really, really low place and I was just completely lost. I knew enough to know that I was lost, but that was about all that I knew. And it was so hard because I had always been a very confident, very strong person. I always felt like I had a really, sure, defined sense of myself. And coming out of that situation, I was broken and I didn't recognize myself at all. And so it was like starting from ground zero, but it felt lower than that because I was at a new low, newer, lower than I'd ever known in my life before. And so I was forever changed by that experience. Now, as I began to heal, it became clear to me pretty quickly that I was going to do whatever it took to not pass these patterns and traumas on to my kids. So anything that was within my power to heal or to work through, no matter how unpleasant the prospect of that might have seemed, I was willing to dive in. And so as I went through that journey, the thing that really helped me was learning EFT or tapping, which I know that you do, and different people that you've had on your podcast do. So your listeners are probably pretty familiar, but it was amazing. It was a game changer for me. So to rebuild my life, my career, everything that I've done since then, it's really just been about wanting to make that process easier for people because it was an uphill battle the whole way to figure those things out. And so yeah, when people are there, when I meet people that are like, I'm here and this is not where I want to be and I'm trying to get better. This is my goal. This is my dream. This is my vision. I'm like, I feel you. I know what it's like to like stand at the edge of that huge chasm, seeing the other side and wanting it so bad, but it feeling so far away. So yeah, that's really where I connect in.
That's beautiful. And I really appreciate you sharing that story. And I think that the openness, the honesty, the vulnerability is what helps people also, because big life events happen and it really does change us to the core sometimes. And the other reason personally, I appreciate you bringing this up is having gone through a divorce 20 years ago. It's 20 years ago, but I can remember like yesterday feeling, you used the most perfect word, lost, lost for a while of, oh, wow, I just have to really start over. And I don't even know who I am. I don't know what I have to offer the world anymore. Yeah. I don't know where's the first step. Where do I go? So I really appreciate that you shared that story and the fact that you were taking that and helping others connect the dots and figure out where to go and find themselves again. So before we talk about the part of finding yourself, let's talk about what women are going through. What are some of the big life events? Like I mentioned, you had to leave in a very rough situation. I got out of a marriage. What are some of the other major life events that women are going through?
Yeah, it's a great question because so much of the answer to that is perception. It can be a move. It can be a change. It can be a fight with a family member you're really close to. It can be things that seem really small. It can also be really large things like the physical loss of a loved one because of a death. We also see this a lot when it comes to traumas that can happen. That can really cause you to lose your bearings. I know there's a sense of that anytime we go through a change in life. And so we see that when we get married, when we have a child or several, every time something that really alters what I like to say is like our foundation, like the ground we're standing on shifts. It's like, who am I now? And what parts of me do I take forward? And what parts of me no longer serve me? And what are the new skills I need to develop to be able to be in this role and to be the best version of this person now? And so really life is full of them. And I'm sure I'm forgetting or not including all of them, but those are the big things that I see and work with.
I think one of the key words that you said is perception, because
Mhm.
we're always going through something, but
Yeah.
it's how we are reacting and perceiving it. And that is what makes it, I think, sometimes harder for us to move forward.
Yeah.
And I love the idea that this is who we are now. And because it feels like every decade we're reinventing ourselves
Yeah.
anyway, and it doesn't even have to be a negative life event. Sometimes there are
Yeah.
positive life events too that change us. And I'm curious, like, what are parts of our identity, or what are the things that you notice that get affected by these changes? How do women feel? How are they affected by these changes? What are all the things that you're seeing?
Yeah. I think the most universal is that whenever you go through a change, it creates a certain level of uncertainty in your life, right? So it seems like when you just start to do good in life, it throws something at you that makes you into these new changing moments of uncertainty. And so what tends to happen is you have a lot of fear that comes up, whether you realize that it's fear or not. And then you feel like you lose a sense of yourself and you really feel confidence shaken. And I think that's the biggest thing, confidence in within yourself and like how you feel within yourself, your ability to move forward, the way you approach others, the way you move through life, all of those things get really affected. And that can be putting on weight, that can be getting a bad haircut sometimes can shake us like that, like those kinds of things. And it seems trivial, but it puts the perspective in that why those big things are so impactful, because it does that at a much more fundamental level. And it makes us question ourselves. And when we do that, that self-doubt really gets in the way of us connecting to our truest, most authentic self. And that's when we tend to have the most regrets when we look back, because we're not navigating from our soul, from our core, from who we truly are.
That is exactly where I kind of wanted to go after this, is the authentic self.
Mhm.
Is I love how you led us right into this. So when someone is going through this and they have this fear and they have this doubt and it's gripping, it makes it really hard to move forward. It makes it hard to
Yeah.
make decisions. It makes it hard we're so afraid we're going to regret whatever decision we make, because we've made decisions in the past that clearly didn't always feel good. How do you help people move through and start to make decisions, and not only make the decisions, but be okay with, if these don't work out, are we still going to be okay?
Yeah. Wow. Such a good question, because it really starts with clarity. The how begins with clarity. It's important to understand where you're starting to figure out where you want to go. And I don't just mean clarity like, okay, this is where I am and this is where I want to be, and like a pros and cons list. I'm talking taking the time to really do a deep dive, checking in with every level of yourself. So mentally, how is this affecting me? Emotionally, how is this affecting me? Um, on a physical level, is this affecting my sleep? Is this making me feel more anxious? Am I feeling more stressed out? Do I feel overwhelmed? And then also on a spiritual level. And I'm not speaking to religion, I'm talking to your sense of purpose, your sense of well being. And that's so, so important, because when you have those changes, sometimes the reasons why, your purpose as you move through life, shifts a little, or it changes. It kind of changes and morphs into something different. And so sitting and getting that clarity helps you to really understand how what serves you and what doesn't. who am I really?
That's interesting. I like the clarity. And what do you do when you're working with someone who's struggling and has a lot of resistance to looking at the identity and the purpose, and things might have to change in order for it to align better? How do you deal with that resistance?
Yeah, it's interesting because the resistance, in my experience, almost always comes back to fear or a level of conditioning. It's really, most of the time, we label it conditioning in our minds, like this isn't acceptable, or I don't want to be offensive, or this isn't, the right thing to say, for example. But it comes back to not want to being rejected, right? So what I tell my clients and what I help them work through is that you don't want to avoid the ugly things, right? Because especially as women, which I'm sure men have this to a certain degree, a lot of what we embody as a gender has to do with pretty and pleasant, right? And pleasing. And so anything that's ugly, we tend to kind of have a tendency not to lean in as hard. And so acknowledging the truth is really important in order to take that emotional charge out of it so that resistance isn't as strong, right? And so you don't always need to have a really deep dive. And I think that's also what's important is getting that clarity and understanding how to move through and look at those things that you want to change. It's important to realize that you don't have to rehash every bad thing that's ever happened to you in order to just understand, like, because of my life experiences, this feels really unfair, or I feel really robbed, or I don't know how to move forward, or I have a hard time saying how I really feel. Like that's enough to get you moving. And that's the point. And then it becomes easier and easier once that momentum builds.
That is great. I really appreciate too that we don't have to go into the deep dive. We can if we want to, but we don't have to be able to make those changes. So thank you for mentioning that. I also want to go back. You have such good points about, when we, as like you said, as a gender, there are sometimes social norms for us in behavior and social norms for what we are supposed to project. And it's really challenging when we have the identity, we have this, we want to be this authentic self, but we're still playing a part. Yeah. So how do you help women who are possibly playing a part? And I'll give you an example. It's a very overused example, but women who are very assertive and direct can sometimes be called, the B word. Sometimes women who are overly aggressive, people make them out to be more of a masculine figure. And there may be some masculine energy, but feeling into your own, whoever you are, how do you help people do that unapologetically? Because I think it would be very hard to move forward even in your purpose if you can't even feel comfortable in who you really are.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a loaded question to unpack.
It's a big one.
It is a big one. So I would start with the importance of needing to build security within yourself. You have to define within yourself what those things mean to you, right? Because when we feel insecure about something, other people are going to be able to trigger us so much easier. And this entire universe is landmines, and social media has only improved that tremendously. So everybody feels so much more free since the advent of social media to judge and to give their opinions to each other. And so in some ways, we have to build a different type of armor when we navigate through life, because we have to understand that, like, if I'm good with me, then I can be good with whatever your opinion is about me. Whether I agree with it or not, I can respect that. But when I'm not good with me, I'm going to take it personally, and then I'm going to be in my emotions, and then I'm going to react. I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to feel betrayed. And so that always starts with building that sense of security, because that's so, so important to have that foundation. And then when you move into a larger picture of the judgments that come and like defining how you've been conditioned to navigate through life as a woman, or because of your gender, or the stereotypes that are there, so much of that to me is about a deeper level of understanding than we're often presented with, right? So we don't really know why we think women are supposed to be a certain way. That has so much to do with our environment that we're raised in and the culture. And when you are able to question that, when you're able to be like, is that true? And is that true everywhere in the world? And what are the positive things in that? You're able to go beyond just the face value of what we believe. And then a lot of times you discover things about yourself that are really beautiful that you didn't even realize were there, right? And so I think that's important, because as you explore feminine energy, for example, from how it's intended to be, you realize that feminine energy is what holds the boundaries. So people who are strong and hold those boundaries and embody protection and everything else, that speaks to feminine energy, not masculine energy. And so it's so important that we realize that sometimes our perception, these imperfect lenses that we see life through, is not actually, it's skewed, right? That's not the whole story.
That's true.
And so maybe someone thinks we're being a big B, but the truth is we have to hold those boundaries, and that's not a masculine thing or a negative thing at all. It's actually incredibly necessary. So yeah, that's good. I don't know if I unpacked all of that, but
That was amazing. And so I think this is a really good place to go with the boundaries, because having boundaries. And before I actually ask you that question, I want to
yeah.
share with our listeners something that you really helped me with
Mm.
in this space is when we are not being really ourselves. And like you said, we're not having that security. We're
Yeah.
very triggered. And what I find is when I'm very triggered, or I feel something from maybe someone on social media or a comment, or feeling like they're challenging me, then I become even more inauthentic because I'm trying to match whatever they want.
Yeah.
But learning from you that when I'm secure in myself and I know what I'm trying to convey, and I know what my values are, and I know what my own worth is,
Yeah.
then I don't have this swing in the wind with every comment and every thought. So just want to take a moment to thank you for that.
Of course. You're so welcome. That makes me happy.
And also talk about, let's get back to those boundaries. I'd love
Okay.
for you to share why for women, this is so important for us to have boundaries in our life in so many areas, and also to talk about the positivity of boundaries, because sometimes when we feel like we have to put boundaries up, we only think of that as a negative. So why is that important for us?
Yeah. Whew. So generally speaking, what we tend to see in this world is that, especially as women, just because of the power dynamics that we see in our culture here in America and a lot of first world countries, is that there's a hierarchy. And because of that, women tend to be taught or to believe, for whatever reason, I'm not trying to get into a lot of more complicated issues here, but just to inform to yourself, we are taught not to, what am I trying to say here? We're really taught, trying to be politically correct. We're taught how to deny ourselves, I think would be the most accurate way to explain what I'm trying to say. So we see this so much because anytime someone isn't in a position of power, in order to survive, we see this in family dynamics with parents and children, right? In order to survive, we have to disconnect from a part of ourself. in order to continue to keep the peace and move forward and be a part of the group and to be acceptable, right? And so that's really important because as you become an adult, as you move into life, especially if you weren't in the healthiest environments, you lose that connection to yourself. You lose that, and that starts to, those as those connections are not used, they die down. And then you have a harder and harder time really knowing, who am I? What do I stand for? What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? And it's okay for me to stand up for myself. And so a big part of that is giving ourselves permission. It's okay for me to take up space. It's okay for me to say no. No is a complete answer. That's one of my favorite quotes. That's a complete sentence. No. And I don't have to justify myself. That boundaries work both ways, right? What I'm doing makes sense for me, and I don't have to justify that to anyone else. That's so important. And so why boundaries are so important, especially as women, is because it's a muscle that we need to be exercising a lot more. And I think that's really a place that compassion comes from. Me having healthy boundaries with you allows us both to be much more compassionate with each other. When I don't set a healthy boundary and you come over into my space and I start resenting you, now I'm not as compassionate. I don't have room for love because you're in my boundaries and you're in my space and I feel a certain kind of way and the frustration rises, right? The injustice feels there. So what we actually see is that the more people can hold healthy boundaries, the more you see respect, love, compassion, understanding for each other in a situation grows tremendously.
Wow, that was amazing. And yes, no is a complete sentence. I like that. And yes,
not mine, but my favorite.
We do not need to worry about taking up space.
Mm-hmm.
But my favorite part of what you just said is the compassion. And I think that was such a valuable insight to, we do feel resentful when we have our boundaries pushed, even though we did not put the boundary up, we feel resentful, or when we're constantly saying yes. And saying yes over and over again with just a habit. And, I think that's from sometimes our conditioning, even at home when we were younger. Maybe we were the peacemaker. Yeah. Maybe we had to say yes because there was conflict or confrontation, but the compassion and the love. But I also, when you were saying that, thought that's really self-compassion and self-love when we set that boundary up too.
Absolutely.
So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about pivoting for women and moving into a passion or a new interest, but maybe someone doesn't really know where they're going. Do you ever have strategies or exercises for people to figure out, like, okay, this is what I have to give, I think, or for them to even evaluate, what are my gifts? What are my talents? Where could I possibly go with this? So how do you help people with that?
Yeah, I like to start with, what do you enjoy the most and what's easiest for you? Because oftentimes we measure things by how good we are at it and not how it feels and not what we like. And so if you put all that aside, one of my favorite exercises is to start with, if there were no limits. Like, imagine a world where you had all the time and all the money and all the space and everything as at your disposal. What would your dream be? What would you want to do? Is that laying on the beach with a margarita? Is that writing a book? Is that painting? Is that creating an amazing course? Is that teaching people? Is that volunteering with animals? Like, whatever it is, big or small, however that's oriented, it's amazing what people will come up with. But you really want to start from that place. If I'm wanting to pivot, if I'm wanting to start a new passion and I don't know where I'm going, I need to realize that I really do. I really do know where I'm going. I just don't feel like I have permission or the resources or the ability, or I'm not good at it. So why would I spend my time there? Everyone will think I'm crazy, like, right? So those judgments can really be a box that holds us back from really connecting with ourselves. And so we have to learn how to zoom out from our own perception and see a bigger picture where there's lots of different versions of life without our limiting beliefs. So how do we look around those beliefs to see what else is out there?
So, what kinds of limiting beliefs come up? What are the things that people are finding as an obstacle, that the thoughts, the perceptions that they're having that are holding them back from moving forward?
They're usually so self-involved. It always comes back to ourself, right? So I think of becoming a coach after my situation, right? And it was like, I don't I don't have the emotional bandwidth. Like you self-deprecate to such a degree, right? And
Yeah.
so that's really what we want to connect in with people is what are the things that are holding you back and are they true? Are they true? Are they really true? And you should ask yourself at least 3 times if the answer is yes, because most of the time it's not. I'm not good enough. I will never be able to find someone who can help me. I don't know what I'm doing. We really can have so many amazing creative ways to come up with the why nots, but we tend to be really bad at the why yes. And that's what we need to kind of focus on. And that's a muscle we have to develop in life. That's a growth mindset, and it's words that we throw around all the time, but it's really just a practice. It's a practice of how we move through life.
That is so true. We tell ourselves the same things, and it can be subconscious. It's not always an
Mhm.
outward situation, but the truth, I love that. Ask yourself 3 times if it's true,
Yeah.
because the reality is it's a perception again, or it's
Yeah.
something we've heard from someone else and it's not even our voice. It's somebody
Mhm.
else's voice.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point.
yeah. So as we are finding out more and redefining our identity and kind of becoming our ourselves again, how is that affecting? Are you seeing a change with women and relationships as they are becoming their own person? And how does that affect how they're acting with people that have expected them to be the same person? Do you have any clients that ever run into like, oh, these people aren't necessarily loving the new me. I'm loving the new me. But how are they dealing with that?
Yeah, this one can be hard, especially for a lot of women. The men I deal with don't tend to have such a big problem with this because lucky them. But oh, as you as you transition into a new identity, right? You are literally, I think of it kind of like re-accessorizing your wardrobe, if you will. You're still fundamentally who you are. All those things are still there, right? But there's certain things that don't serve you anymore. Like I don't wear my scrunchies from the 80s anymore in my hair. I mean, even though they're coming back, that would look weird at my age, right? So it's like we're re-accessorizing, we're adapting, we're taking on things that now serve us, and we're letting go of things that don't serve us anymore. But these are aspects of ourselves, of our personality. And a lot of times it's aspects of our priorities. And so if we're changing the way that our priorities come together and the what we value the most and how we're spending our time, and we're letting go of things that don't serve us anymore, we I always try to pre-frame or explain this to my clients ahead of time, like as you're growing, it's going to feel wrong when you start to lose things that are comfortable and normal for you, but we need to celebrate that. So I'm telling you right now, that when you come in and you're like, this just happened, or I'm not like jiving with my best friend as much, or things are rocky in my marriage right now, we're just not connecting like we used to. Celebrate that. That right there is proof. It is 100% proof that you are moving forward, that you are growing, and that you are changing. And then I think it's so important to be very intentional with how you take the time to just evaluate, this is important to me, so what does this look like now? Right? Because we can get too caught up in the fact that we have one foot in the past and one foot in the future, and we're kind of teeter-tottering back and forth. So in all fairness, that can be really confusing for the people around us. So just because things can be a little uncertain or a little more crazy for a little while, doesn't mean that's the big picture. Also, address those things as they come up. And having that support with someone that's completely neutral makes that transition so much easier and so much faster.
I can imagine too that when those obstacles come up, that it's hard to not want to go back in time a little bit. And sometimes that the identity building again is kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, as you get stronger and stronger and more resilient. So interestingly enough, when you say identity, something that comes across my mind that I'd love to get your thoughts on is sometimes we wrap our identity up in things that aren't really truly who we are as people. So when I was a high school math teacher, I was a teacher. I had an identity. Everybody knew what a teacher was. And then I became a holistic nutritional health coach, and nobody knew what that was. And my identity was a little crushed there. I was a marathon runner at one point. And everybody was like, oh, that's so great. My identity was wrapped up in this, being able to run this distance. And then when I stopped doing it, I didn't have it anymore. I think we wrap ourselves up in careers and sports and abilities. How do you see that with people and kind of help them shift into who they really are as opposed to what they do?
Yeah. So if you think about everything that you just named and what we think of as identity, the common denominator across all of those things is that they're all things that give us a sense of self-worth. They're all things we take pride in. It's where we find our value. And those are all very superficial things, right? It wasn't like because I'm a good person, or because I'm really loyal, or because I'm so caring and loving, because I have such a strong sense of integrity. And those things tend to not be as glorified, and we tend to undervalue them. And so it's really a process of relearning or learning for the first time often how valuable we really are and where our value really lays. And it's not in external factors. It's not in how beautiful we are, or how small our waist is, or how well we do something, or how fast we ran, or, it's not in these external accolades that we accomplish. It's not the job that we do, although we can get validation from those. I'm not devaluing any of those things, but what I'm saying is we have to look at those things that we used to value. So I think this is a great exercise if you are listening, or just for us in general, is look at those things. If you were, let's say, the marathon runner, right? What need did that feel? Was it this sense of accomplishment? Was it the attention that it got me? Was it like whatever? I'm just making it up, right? But what need did it feel for me to do this thing? Why did it feel so good? What did I value from that identity, if you will? And then once you identify the need that it filled, you need to feed yourself that thing, nourish that need within yourself, and feed that within yourself until you're so satisfied that that is within you already, right? So find other ways, recognize where you get that and where you have it, and really learn to appreciate what you have within yourself. We don't tend to acknowledge those aspects of ourselves nearly as consistently and as profoundly as we should. But I'm going to tell you, once you do, you become rock solid, no matter the transition that comes, no matter what happens, no matter which hat you take on or put off as you move through life. You will be able to navigate everything so much better because it comes from within you and not an external source.
Wow. Pam, that was really powerful. And I think that's important for everyone to understand where, first of all, they do need to feed themselves if that's what they're looking for. But like you said, just becoming very rock solid when you really know your true worth. And I'll tell you a funny story. I went to some outing where people were mingling and meeting up with each other. And I was really impressed because someone came up to me and instead of saying, "What do you do?" Because that's normally how people start because they don't really know what to say.
Yep.
This person said to me, "What do you do for fun? What makes you happy?" And I thought, what a fun question to break free of putting a label on everyone. Just what makes them happy? What do they like to do? So I thought that was really wonderful. You have such amazing insight. And I know that our listeners are getting a lot out of this. I hope everyone's taking notes. So I always share with my listeners that it's really important to nourish our entire lives.
Yes.
And with that said, what 3 tips could you possibly give to everyone if they're kind of just starting on this journey? They're not really sure where to go. It could be things you've already mentioned or anything new that comes to mind that just kind of sets everybody up to ask the right questions or to get started. What would you say?
Yeah. So when we relate this to transitions and to developing a new sense of yourself, a new identity, if you will, we touched on clarity. And I think that that's so important. And I want to clarify what I mean when I say clarity, because when you are going through this type of a transformation of who you are becoming, and you're changing your identity or you're shifting it, we need so much to focus on the good things that we have. We tend to focus on the lack. So it's really important that you're list all the things you don't like, right? So how I would recommend doing this clarity is either write it all out or talk it all out with yourself. If you talk it out, like if you like to take walks, for example, go be the crazy person talking to themselves, but just hear yourself talk or record it so you can listen to it later because it'll be very insightful for you. And say all the things, list all the negative things you don't like about where you're at right now. But also take time to really look at what you do have, what you are, how strong you are for where you've been, what you've been through, what you've accomplished. All those things matter, and they will help you to really understand how resourceful you are. So getting clarity is my first one. The second one I talked on a little bit, which was not avoiding the ugly things. Acknowledgement is so important, acknowledging it. And so I like to say, understanding neutralizes negativity. So when we are feeling negative about something, when we're resisting moving forward with something, there's a lot of negative emotions there. But when we increase our understanding, we'll be able to move right through it. If we know this isn't going to last forever, or this is just the way it feels today, tomorrow will be different, or this is just because of where I'm at, it helps us so much. And I really like the tool of using yes and, right? So acknowledge something negative and say yes, and this is the good side of it, or here's another piece. There's more sides to the story. The last thing I like to talk about is really, I love working with this. Is one of my core values when I work with my clients is looking at every problem as an opportunity. And so how I teach my clients to do this, when they are getting started on this concept, I really ask them, what is the gift this problem is bringing you? Right? And that's so important because we tend to think that we shouldn't have problems. That's one of Tony Robbins' favorite quotes, right? The problem is you think you shouldn't have problems, but the power of problems is that you grow and you learn and you become better from each and every one. And you have them because it's bringing something positive to your life. You will keep having them if you don't learn what that is. So take a moment. What is the gift? What's the higher learning? What's the benefit? Is it making me more patient, more compassionate, more resilient? Am I learning how much I can handle? My endurance is being built. It can feel like a negative thing, but spin it, turn it on its side, make it a gift. And all of a sudden you become so much more resourceful to move through those transitions and to get to the other side faster. It's amazing.
Those are powerful. Number 3 is great. That
Thank
problem
you.
is a gift. It's there to teach us something.
Yeah.
So the last thing before we go on and share where to find you is, and we're probably going to have to bring you back for a part 2 on this, but I would love for you to share our absolute favorite way to work through some of these things with people, and just give us a quick way of why you like using the tapping and what you think it helps your clients do, especially when they're going through some of the things we talked about today.
Yeah. So tapping is my favorite for a couple of reasons, but one of the things that I think is not spoken on enough is that tapping also, not only does it calm our nervous system, most people really focus on that point, it also releases stuck energy. So those are the biggest reasons it feels so good when we tap. The bigger picture of what tapping brings to us and why it's so profound, if you're looking to make long-term transformation in your life, is that it reprograms the mind-body connection. And so with tapping, you can literally rewrite how your mind remembers certain memories that elicit feelings. So when you have those memories and you're tapping and you're choosing the feelings that come up, or you're releasing the feelings, you don't remember them with those negative feelings anymore, right? And so that's amazing, right? All of a sudden I don't have that anxiety or that fear or that overwhelm when I have that memory. I'm rewriting it. Now, where it gets supercharged for me and why I love it so much is because you can also use it to reprogram how your mind thinks about future events, especially things that bring up anxiety or fear or overwhelm. So not only are you rewiring that mind-body connection for the past, which helps you to be solid in yourself now, when you use it into the future, or like we call it tapping forward a lot of the time, you can change your entire reality and how you're able to move forward. Because studies show that when you use it like with PTSD, for example, and you rewrite the way that your mind and body connect, you can change your whole life. There is no limits. And so why wouldn't you want to use a tool like that? Add to that, it's free and it's easy. You should immediately start finding tapping coaches, because when you have a coach who knows what to do and how to use that tool effectively, you're going to find amazing things, and how easy it is to work through them. And your whole inner world changes, which changes your whole outer world. How we feel is everything. So yeah, I honestly, like, it seems grandiose, but tapping in a lot of ways saved my life. I don't know where I would be mentally or emotionally had I not found tapping and started learning how to use it. But it's very approachable. So I don't want to have anyone listening. So if you're listening, check in right now. I don't want you to feel intimidated by tapping. because it is so easy to start doing, and you get the benefits every time you tap, whether you do it exactly right or not. So, I mean, when I started, it was just with YouTube videos that I found. And then I eventually went to like trainings and things like that. The results were immediate, and that's the most important part. So if you have any curiosity, I would definitely encourage you to give it a try.
Absolutely. Thank you for that explanation. And some of the things that you shared today, I learned something because I have not heard those other layers of how tapping helps. And thanks to you, Kemma, in our group, it has brought something to my coaching that has brought it to the next level to really help people. So I appreciate that. And you are such a gift. So please tell everyone, where can they find you?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. That's probably my main place. And it's Thrive with Kemma. I'm also on TikTok. And then I am launching my website, Thrive with Kemma, but that should be up by the time this airs. So that'll be fantastic. And I always have different resources. One of my core values is to help people with actionable things. So on Instagram, you would be able to get a lot of really tangible help if that's something that you're interested in moving forward with.
That's great. And we're going to put all of those links in the show notes for you to reach out, and make sure you go to that link in Kemma's bio and check out everything that she has to offer. Kemma, I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate you being here so much. And the value that you brought to today's show was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I am so honored.
So everyone, please remember to nourish your entire life and give yourself grace today. I really appreciate you being here. If you resonated with this podcast, it would mean a lot to me if you'd be willing to follow or subscribe to the Emotional Eats podcast. Then you'll never miss an episode. Just go to the Emotional Eats show page on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner and click on it. While you're there, if you'd be willing to give me a 5-star rating and review, I would be so grateful. If you'd like to take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, just tag me at Kim Hines Health. I would love to hear your thoughts and let me know how I can support you. You can always DM me on Instagram, again, at Kim Hines Health. And just remember to nourish your life and give yourself grace today.